Everyone is saying the same thing about the UK at the moment, and that it's just a little bit shit. But I moved to Australia nearly 5 years ago, and while I mostly have fond memories of the country that I grew up in, it kind of saddens me a little bit to see how crap it's become. So because I haven't been back in nearly 5 years, I wanted to have a look at the sorry state of the UK and see, did I make the right decision in moving to Australia with my young family all those years ago? So the first thing, is the UK's economy really that broken? With stagnant wages, rising taxes, inflation, I guess the fact is that since 2020, prices have risen for energy and food, the kind of things that you need in life, at least 25%. And in Australia, the cost of living, well, that's no joke either. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it's risen higher, if not more. But the fact is, in Australia, they do pay you a little bit more. And according to one statistic that I found, around 60% of graduates in the UK earn less than £30,000 even after 5 years. Even professionals hit walls. Well, the fact is that Australia has one of the highest minimum wages, and it's job mobility as well. According to the OECD, only 9% of workers actually changed jobs since 2003, which is one of the lowest in the OECD. The UK also has what we'd describe as pension poverty. We can't really have that in Australia because they don't really, well, they do have pensions, but they're means tested. And instead there's superannuation. Even when I lived there, I actually contributed more as a person to my pension than my employer. And even then the whole contribution wasn't even as much as 10%, I think it was about 8. And apparently a teacher's pension was a good pension. In Australia, I think by next year, superannuation contributions just by your employer are going to get up to about 12% on top of your salary. So when you're thinking about Australia already having higher than UK wages, you're not going to be worried as much for your future when it comes to your superannuation. In the UK, housing is a nightmare, but not necessarily for the straight up reasons that you'd expect. Yes, homes have high prices in both countries, whether it's the UK or Australia, but there are also some subtle imbalances that might make the UK seem a bit worse. For example, bidding wars. Let's face it, with the cost of houses now, a lot of them are going to auction just to try and squeeze that extra bit of money out of you. Cheers, real estate agents. And in the UK, about 42% of renters were asked by the real estate agents to offer over the asking price in order to get it. Now in Australia, there are laws that kind of help to protect against shady deals from real estate agents. For a start, in many states and territories, price increases are actually capped. There are no secret bids, all bids must be declared. And it's not just even renting, it's the effect on home ownership as well. In the UK, only 28% of 25 to 34-year-olds own their own home. Now it's not much better in Australia, but in 2021, about 43% of 25 to 34-year-olds own their home versus renting. But even when you buy a property in the UK, particularly if you're on a lower income, the UK can even be much worse because of this leasehold versus freehold ruling. In the UK, 4.6 million homes are leasehold, which is around about 20% of all the homes in the UK. And to make it simply, if you have a leasehold property, you never really own the land where your house is, but it's kind of more just like a long-term rent off someone else. And that long-term rent has fees associated with it, which can be in the hundreds for your ground rent to thousands of dollars for everything else that they want to add on. Now in Australia, you don't really have leaseholds, with the vast majority of homes in Australia being freehold. Sure, you have strata fees, but that's actually a fee that just pays for the communal areas that you may have associated with your apartment or where you live. And the comparison between strata fees and leasehold fees is that even in some of the more expensive parts of Australia like Sydney can actually still be cheaper than comparisons in London. But what about when you actually find somewhere to live, especially if you're renting? Have you ever heard about the UK mould crisis? Okay, it might not actually be a thing, I've just made up that name, but the statistics are that 1 in 5 homes in the UK have a dangerous amount of mould. In Australia, by law, rentals must have heating, insulation and no mould. Now this could be debatable by certainly some people watching this, and they're going, I got some mould in my Australian home. But in Australia, tenancy laws actually protect you and you can withhold your rent until it's fixed. And if you live in Victoria, landlords can be fined thousands of dollars for ignoring repairs or requests from their tenants. How about if you live in the UK, what do you think about your work-life balance? And is it dead? Because according to a TUC survey, 60% of Brits feel overworked. It's almost like in the UK you have this always-on kind of culture. And according to Deloitte in 2024, 72% of workers check emails outside of hours. Well, in Australia it's legally enforceable possible that you have a right to disconnect outside of work hours, meaning that employers can't punish you for not responding to emails or calls. According to the CIPD, Brits are 3 times more likely to burn out from unpaid overtime. And if it wasn't bad enough, 62% of UK workers skip lunch or have lunch at their desk. Whereas according to the ABS, 88% of Australian workers take full lunch breaks, with 30 minutes being the standard. But it's not even about where you take lunch now, because it seems in the UK they have a presenteeism problem. Try and say that too quickly. Where according to Stanford in 2024, 57% of bosses judge performance by attendance. And this has led to about 12% of jobs advertised in the UK as advertised as fully remote or having a 4-day work week. It seems that this is more of a trend in Australia, where they have 42% of jobs advertised as that, which is no reason why Australian remote workers report 20% more job satisfaction. But what about when you feel a bit crook? Even when I used to live in the UK, I had this kind of sick day guilt. Maybe that was because I was a teacher, and it seems to be the only profession whereby if you are sick, it's probably more effort to organise a day off than just to go in. But according to the CIPD, 1 in 3 Brits report going to work even when they're sick because they just don't want to deal with the backlash. But let's forget about work for the moment, because you don't want to bring work home with you. So how do you feel about the safety of where you live? In 2023 in England and Wales, there are over 50,000 knife crime incidents, up 70% since 2015. Theft rates are over 1,000 per 100,000 people in the UK. Australia has 43% of that. So it's no wonder since the 2024 survey that 62% of Brits feel that crime has worsened. I mean, they're just following the statistics, aren't they? According to 2023 Met Police data, 1 in 5 crimes in the UK are now resolved by a digital resolution. What even does that mean? Whereas in Australia since 2022, there's been a 15% increase in foot patrols, meaning that in Sydney CBD, there is about 1 police officer per 250 people. And according to ABS victim surveys, you're 3 times more likely to speak to an officer after being the victim of crime. I don't really feel unsafe walking around in Australia. Maybe that's just a Brisbane thing, but even when I'm in the valley with all the drunk idiots, I don't feel unsafe. In the UK, 83% of town centres have consistent antisocial behaviour. Australia seems to be changing that trend, with dedicated safe night areas like in the Gold Coast. These have free transport, medics, pub bans for violent people. I mean, I think they did that in the UK as well. But overall, the programme has reduced violent assaults by 42% in the last 2 years. I don't feel like stuff is going to be stolen in Australia, whereas in the UK, a bike is stolen every 90 seconds. But you'd think if it got stolen, they'd get it back, right? Yeah, there's a 3% recovery rate. In Australia, they've actually got enough resources to set up bait bikes. And in Melbourne and Sydney, they actually set up bikes with GPS trackers in them, and they've got about a 78% arrest rate. But let's just forget about your workplace or the safety of where you live for a second. How does it compare when you're probably in your most vulnerable state? Because I feel at the moment the NHS is kind of collapsing. According to NHS England in 2023, 44% of UK patients wait more than 4 hours in accident and emergency. 1 in 5 Brits wait over 2 weeks for a GP's appointment, whereas in comparison in Australia, 93% of people can see a GP within the same week. Now you might have to pay for it because, bulk billing doctors are harder to come by nowadays. But I know that there's a bulk billing doctor near me. They don't do appointments, you just sit there and wait, a bit like emergency. But I can pretty much guarantee if I turn up in the morning, if I'm that sick enough, I will get seen that day. And whilst I don't advocate going to emergency unless it is an emergency, at least for my hospitals in Queensland, if you want to check what the current wait times are, you just log online and it tells you. And sometimes the wait time is surprisingly low. But I guess it's not getting any easier for the UK. Since 2019, over 1,000 GP practices have closed. And according to the NHS, patients now travel on average 18 miles to see their GP. And whilst in Australia, particularly in rural areas, it doesn't get much better, 92% of clinics are open on weekends. And if you only need to see the doctor for a minor thing and you want it to be bulk billed or free, there are telehealth services like 13 Sick, which you can access from anywhere. I think I'd be scared if I got cancer in the UK right now, because according to Macmillan, 1 in 3 cancer patients wait over 2 months to start treatment. In Australia, 93% of them start within 30 days. And for some cancers, like melanoma, Australia has some of the best services in the world, probably because they have the most of them. But in Australia, melanoma detection takes just 3 days. In the UK, it's about 28. Schools are overcrowded and underfunded. Now, you might be mistaken if you heard that headline in Australia, but it doesn't get much better in the UK. According to YouGov, 40% of parents are unhappy with state schools. And if you've watched that new thing on Netflix, Adolescence, yeah, you can probably see why. In Australia, there are smaller class sizes. The average primary class size in the UK is 27. In Australia, it's about 23, 24. And not only are lessons a little bit more outdoor focused, The general curriculum demands are less exam-based. Why do you need to test people so much anyway? But it's not even that, it's the environment that they learn in. According to the Department for Education in 2023, 37% of primary schools still use temporary classrooms. Some of them for over 10 years. I remember the porta cabins when I went to school. They were just bloody cold. According to the NEU in 2024, 90% of teachers say that SATs, which are the UK's form of standardised testing, harm mental health. Well, in Australia, whilst they do have some standardised testing in that plan, you can just opt out of it, mate. It's not compulsory. And the best thing is that there aren't really any league tables that pressurise schools. The fact is that they don't really value exam assessment as much. In Queensland, for example, secondary school students can be assessed all the way up to 18 using a learning journal. You just write about your learning. So it's no wonder why in the UK 44% of teachers plan to quit within the next 5 years. Well, don't quit, mate, just move to Australia. There's loads of teacher vacancies. If you want to work regionally, some of them might have $14,000 signing on bonuses. But if you're thinking about your kids or you are a younger person and you're wondering what's going to happen when they go to university, the average student debt in the UK is about £45,000 or $90,000 at today's exchange rates. In Australia, it's around about $27,000. And there's no interest. I mean, they're indexed, which is a slightly different way of doing it, but it doesn't end up being as much. I also feel that in Australia, they value trades a lot more. So if university isn't even for you and you just don't want that debt, why don't you go and be an apprentice and probably end up earning more money than all of us? The weather in the UK is depressing. Or if you live in southeast Queensland like me, you can probably say the same between February and March. But at least we don't have 4+ months of absolute darkness. And apparently seasonal affectiveness disorder is on the rise. London gets 1,633 hours of sunlight per year, which is less than Moscow. In comparison, Perth gets 3,200, which despite Australia's use of coal and gas, is enough sunlight to power all of their homes. Australia even has so much sun and solar power for that matter, that some Australian homes can report negative bills. That's where the power company pays you. Now you might be thinking to yourself, all this heat comes with the problem, humidity. But you remember that mold thing I was telling you about? In Sydney, for example, they have on average 64% humidity. That's much higher obviously in Brisbane. But you know what Manchester's is? 88% during the winter when it's cold. Now that's a very brief science lesson, but that's the reason why they have so much mold. 78% of workers in the UK travel to and from work in complete darkness between December and February. Now you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, but if you work in Australia, doesn't it get bloody hot? Well, they actually align their working hours to when the sun comes up, with many construction areas starting at either 6 or 7 o'clock, and even some of the states that have summertime hours making it even easier. It's no wonder that the UK has a 50% vitamin D deficiency rate. And that poor old NHS spends £80 million a year just on supplements. In Perth, on average, the winter is warmer than a UK summer. Still wouldn't make me want to move to Perth though. I wonder sometimes how people in the UK can even afford to have kids. Sure, it's free to have them on the NHS in a hospital, but according to Quorum in 2024, it costs around £15,000 a year to put your child into full-time daycare. Sure, once they hit the age of 3, you get 30 hours of free daycare, but in Australia, they subsidise this up to 85% from basically when the kid is born, which often means that in the UK, sometimes it doesn't even work out financially to send your kid to childcare, to have someone else raise it, for you to just go to work and spend all your money on childcare. Some daycares even scam parents into paying a deposit just to put their name down for a place which they're probably not going to get. In Australia, it's illegal for them to charge upfront fees, so you're either going to get in or you're not. At least they're going to be upfront with you. Australia even has some pronatal policies in some states. For example, in Victoria, when you have a kid born in a public hospital, you even get given a little baby pack with about $300 worth of stuff. Whereas in the UK, according to the Trussell Trust in 2024, 1 in 4 parents actually skip meals just so they can afford nappies. And don't get me started on when the poor buggers have to go to school. In the UK, teachers see about 60% of kids excluded from school trips just because they can't afford it. This is actually kind of illegal in Australia, because in Queensland, schools can't charge for essential curriculum trips. And to keep the kids active anyway, most states actually give vouchers for things like swimming or music or other kind of clubs that they can use with local businesses. So, are you living in the UK at the moment and thinking to yourself that you want a fresh start? According to a 2024 survey, 55% of 18 to 34-year-olds think that the UK is done. And in 2023, 1.2 million Brits emigrated. And it's no surprise that Australia seems to be its top destination. Australia ranks about 10th globally on the World Happiness Report. The UK is 19th. The UK has a class ceiling. Only 10% of people from working class backgrounds reach the top jobs in companies. Whereas according to LinkedIn, 67% of CEOs in Australia actually came from blue collar jobs. It seems like tall poppy syndrome syndrome actually discourages elitism. Are you urbanly isolated in the UK? 38% of people report that they have no close friends. The UK just has an institution of distrust, with 1 in 5 people actually trusting politicians. It's not much better in Australia, but at least it's 46%. And that's probably got something to do with Australia not having this first past the post electoral system. Instead, they have preferential voting. According to YouGov, 53% of 30-year-olds just feel stuck. A stuck in life crisis. So if you're watching this right now and you're thinking to yourself you're in a bit of a rut, you've thought about Australia but you don't really know where to start, then I can help you. We've teamed up with a visa agency called Trueblue Migration Services, and when you mention that Johnston Life and upload your CV or resume, they're going to tell you absolutely for free what your options are for moving to Australia. Especially if you're a skilled migrant like I was when I moved. I'm a teacher. There are definitely places for you here, especially if you work in the construction industry. And if you're worried about all of the hassle and what it takes to actually fill in all of the forms, then after you've realised how good the service is with Trueblue Migration, because you mentioned us, you'll save $200 off the cost of your visa. Don't think of the cost of moving to Australia and using a visa agent as a barrier to entry. Start saving your pennies and think of the cost of buying a visa to Australia as more like an investment in the rest of your life. If you're one of those people saying the same things about the quality of life in the UK right now, then I can guarantee that you're going to end up living to become one of 2 people. Number 1, you're going to make a change and end up living your best life. Or number 2, you're going to do nothing about it and you're just going to end up living a life of regret. Which one's it going to be? And if you're not convinced and you want to know more of what life is like in Australia, then watch this video. I'll see you next time.